Hi, this is Brendan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and this is a late night movie discussion. I just watched the movie House. For those who don't know about the late night movie review thing, I watch movies and then I talk about them really late at night. I sometimes do it on the Horror Express with Joel and Adam, but a lot of times I just do it on my own. And it's kind of like doing a drunk podcast. I don't drink, I don't do drugs, but the closest I get to any kind of altered state of consciousness these days is staying up late and talking about movies. So I'm just in a very tired, lethargic, and I don't know, disoriented state. And I like talking about movies off the cuff and sort of just I don't know. I just find it relaxing. And for whatever reason, some people like listening to these, so I keep posting them every once in a while. But they're definitely not for everybody. I meander. I lose my train of thought. I have no planned out topics or anything. I just kind of talk, and I just see how it goes. And sometimes I get completely lost for a few moments, and it takes me a moment to get back on track. So I watched the movie House. Um, I don't know if anybody's familiar with it, but it came out in 1986, and it stars the guy from The Greatest American Hero and from Carrie, William Catt, and it also stars George Wendt, and Richard Mall, the guy who played I think the bailiff in Night Court. So you kind of have three actors from three big TV shows in the early '80s, the mid '80s roughly, and it's a really odd film. I remember really liking the movie. I saw it when I was a kid. I saw it when it came out. My uncle was really into this movie. He used to quote it all the time. And actually, I don't know if I saw it in the theater or if I saw it on video, but I saw it, whatever the case, I saw it around the time that it came out. And I just remember, there's this quote in the movie where he says, they tortured me for weeks. My uncle was just constantly quoting that. And this is kind of like a corny horror movie. It's got like monster movie vibes to it. It's a haunted house film with really odd tone. There's comedy, but it gets really dark at moments, and the special effects are really strange and I think pretty effective. They're pretty scary for what they are. But it's definitely an odd movie. I don't know how to quite pin it down. It's not at all what I remembered. I remembered it being kind of a straightforward haunted house movie with maybe a little bit of that like mid '80s kind of oddness to it, like Return of the Living Dead type stuff. But this is even weirder than that, I think. It's definitely a quirky movie, and I don't know. I haven't seen it in ages, and so I really forgot almost everything except for the fact that, the basic premise of it is William Ketty plays this guy named Roger Cobb, who's like a horror writer, and he's going through writer's block, and he's in the middle of a divorce because his son disappeared. I forget what the timeline is, but his son disappeared while they were at his aunt's house. His aunt commits suicide at the beginning of the movie, and he goes and moves into the house, and his aunt had thought the house was haunted, and it turns out he's a Vietnam vet, and the house is haunted by the Richard Mall character, who was somebody he was in Vietnam with. And I'll get into the backstory there in a moment. And I remember that, and I remember him going into, there's this sort of portal in the house that leads to kind of like a memory hole of, not memory hole, like a haunted version of his time in Vietnam. And I remembered that. I remembered him confronting the Richard Mall ghost at the end, and just some of the basic outlines of the story, but I didn't remember any of the details. So it was interesting to watch. The Richard Mall character, he's so that when he appears as a ghost, he looks kind of like Eddie from Iron Maiden, and the Vietnam sequences themselves. And again, I'm going to be talking really out of order. I know this is not organized at all, but the Vietnam sequences they're weird because they look kind of cheap, and they look sort of halfway between something you would see on a sitcom or a TV show and something in a movie. But I don't know, they're just something not. And maybe I'm just misremembering at what point movies started to look a certain way, but it looks not just out of date, but just the tone feels off. It doesn't feel very realistic at all. I don't even know that it needs to necessarily, but just the Vietnam flashbacks are really odd. And basically, when he's in Vietnam, the premise is he's the Richard Mole character. His name is Big Ben, and he's this big oaf of a guy. He's kind of a jerk, but he ends up getting wounded, and he asks Roger Cobb to kill him because he doesn't want to be captured, and Roger can't finish him off, and so he gets captured and he gets tortured, and he vows revenge, and so he basically comes back as a haunting in this house, and that's the basic backstory. He ends up he's the reason that the son disappears. He pulls him into that haunted Vietnam landscape and captures him, and he's doing that to lure Roger in there so he can kill Roger. And so it's it's kind of an interesting premise. Again, around this time, 1986, Vietnam was still really in the air. I remember it being, and everything, I've talked about it before, but I mean, it's just, I think if, and anybody my age would remember this, but I think people that are younger might not realize just how much it hung over everything, and how you were still hearing from people who were there, what it was like. And, I mean, it wasn't that long before this period. So it wasn't the distance that it is now. And so it worked as an idea. I thought that, it was, I don't know, it's kind of interesting that, he has this haunted house, and, it's connected to his time in Vietnam, and he can literally kind of go back to it by, and again, there are various entry points in the house, but, and the physics of it aren't exactly clear. But these hauntings can also come through and attack him. And so there's a variety of monsters. I don't know what they're supposed to be, because they don't. Big Ben is clearly another soldier that he knew from Vietnam, but all the other monsters are just unless I'm missing something, they all seem kind of random. The only one that isn't is this weird version of his ex-wife, which is just, it looks almost like the monsters from Dead Alive. It's got, or from the movie we just saw not too long ago, Bad Taste. I think it's got kind of that look, but not quite that puppety. But it definitely has a little bit of that look to it. It's like there's something grotesque and almost comically obscene about the ghosts and the monsters in the film. And so I don't know. I it's a weird movie. Like midway through the film. So George Wendt, the neighbor, is concerned because he's worried that Roger is going crazy. So he calls the ex-wife, who's a movie star, and the ex-wife shows up, and then Roger's already kind of walking around the house with a gun because he's been dealing with ghosts, and he's talking to her, and then she transforms into this sort of weird, monstrous version of the ex-wife, and he shoots her, and it looks like he kills her, and then the police show up, and he drags her into a closet, and the police come in for coffee, and George Wendt comes in for coffee, and it's just really strange because I completely forgot about that section of the movie. But also, whether he actually killed his ex-wife or not is not at all clear until much later in the movie, and he doesn't. I mean, maybe he's dealing with so many things; it's sort of just he puts it on the back burner. But it does just seem sort of odd the way that he, it seems like he might have murdered his ex-wife, and then he just kind of goes on with things. Not goes on with things, but he starts dealing with all the things that he's been contending with and not really worrying about that, including writing this book that he's been trying to work on. And in the midst of all that, this sort of sexy neighbor lady that, seems to be seducing him early in the movie, shows up, and it looks like they're going to have a date, and she really just brought her son over so she can have him babysit the son while she goes out on a date with someone else. And so it's just all these weird little things happening. And those kinds of things do a good job of sort of forcing the main character to deal with the ghosts, but also have to contend with the fact that he's got this kid that he has to protect that he's babysitting. And so that kind of raises the stakes a bit. It all works, but it's just a strange film. I didn't remember it being this odd. And on top of that, the music is really weird. Like when he when he shoots the ghost that he thinks that may or may not be his ex-wife, he starts chopping her to bits and putting her in a trash bag and is going to bury her in the backyard. I can't remember. I can't remember the song, but it's like there's like a breakup song from like the mid '60s that it plays, like a '60s pop song, and it plays a lot of music like that throughout, and it creates a weird tone. Again, I mean, a lot of movies in this time were strange. I just remember this one being much more straightforward, and not not this odd. And that happens a lot. Sometimes I'll go back and I'll watch a movie and it'll really kind of stand out. It's also weird because it's got George Wendt, it's got again William Catt and Richard Mall, and it's kind of an odd team. The chemistry is really strange. I like George Wendt. Cheers was really big at this time, and so he makes a reliable neighbor in a movie. It's a role that he does well. And it's just like a I don't know. It's just an odd movie. But the George Wendt character works. He has kind of a he has this comedic introduction, and then he kind of becomes a little bit more of a background character. But when they first introduce him, and I feel like this must have been for the trailer because it looks like something they would have put in the trailer. But he's basically doing this thing where he's like, oh well, the lady that used to live here was crazy. She was insane. She was a hag. But it's great to have somebody normal. And then William Catt responds, it was my aunt, and he's like, oh, a saint, a beautiful woman, pretty for her age. It's just it was stupid, but it was funny, and I feel like it was maybe designed for the trailer because I don't know if I have a memory of seeing that in the trailer or if I just feel like that was something that would have been in the trailer. But yeah, so there were those elements, and then the just the constant going back to Vietnam. And I guess what's weird about it is you kind of almost expect it to be a more serious exploration of, because it works. It's like this guy's sort of haunted by the memories of Vietnam, and so that's kind of what the movie is really about, him dealing with. But it's Richard Mall. I mean, it's not even at the time, like, Richard Mall is not like he's not a serious actor. He works really well as a bad guy, but he's a goofy bad guy, like a really goofy bad guy. He even walks kind of goofy. He's kind of like he's sort of like the poor man's Jesse the Body Ventura. He just has that like he's got like a Jesse Ventura look, but he's slouched. He kind of he makes expressions that just kind of mugs a little bit for the camera in odd ways. It's like he's channeling energy similar to Jesse the Body Ventura, but it's not landing as dramatically somehow. I don't know quite know how to put it, but it's the only other movie I remember in a role like this from was that there was a movie, I think it was called The Dungeon Master or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but I remember him being in a movie. I feel like it was a similar kind of role. But the Richard Mall character, I think his name was Bull in that. I can't remember what his name in Night Court was, but it was something like that. And in this one they call him Enoch, so it's still kind of a similar character. And his nickname is actually Big Ben in the movie. But yeah, it's just weird. I feel like you almost expect the flashbacks to be more like Platoon, or just something a little more serious. Just there's just like I was watching those scenes and I was like, why is this not working? Not that they weren't working, but why does it feel weird that they're having these the like, what about the atmosphere and the acting and the pacing and the cinematography of these Vietnam sequences feels off and just kind of too light or something, and I couldn't put my finger on it. Some of it might have been, in fact, just the old movie being put onto HD, and that sometimes have effects like that. But I feel like this is how it would have looked back then too. So I think it was more things like the lighting, things like I couldn't tell if it was a set or not, but it looked kind of like a set, but I could be wrong. Um, Something about just the way that just the direction of it and everything. I don't know what it was, but it just felt too light, and maybe that's what they were going for. Um, but yeah, so it's interesting that it's dealing with fairly serious subject matter, but it's kind of managing it all in a very oddball kind of light way. So I don't know. I as haunted house movies go, I think it's entertaining. This is actually a movie when I was a kid. I know I watched it a lot, so I got really sick of it. Not sick of it, but it just became like one of those movies that you watch so much when you're a kid that you just can't even watch them anymore because you remember every line, and I don't know, you just reach a point of too much saturation with a particular movie when you're a kid. And this is one we must have had on video for whatever reason, so I probably watched it a lot because of that. And so I don't know, but I hadn't watched it in, you know, I don't know, how long has it been? I mean, probably over 30 years since I watched it, and so that's a considerable amount of time. And so it was kind of nice being able to go back and watch it and not know what was going to happen. Um, but again, it just was not like what I remembered at all. I mean, I think I remembered it being quirky, but not like this. Um, and there's stuff that I'm not remembering that I want to bring up because I know that there was like weird things. I was like, oh, that's kind of odd. Oh, that's kind of odd. I was gonna write notes, but I don't write notes for these things. I don't, I just don't like doing that for the late night ones. I part of the point is I'm supposed to lose my track of thought. Um, but just the way that I don't know, just the 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 way that he brings in the George Wendt character to help him deal with the ghosts, his character becomes like, he starts out as like a really straight laced kind of character, and by the end he's kind of got this almost like a Michael J. Fox kind of performance. I don't know quite how to put it, but just like his mannerisms remind me a little bit of Michael J. Fox from like Back to the Future and stuff. Just the way uh, just in the ways that Michael J. Fox is sometimes eccentric. That's sort of the eccentricities that his character develops as he gets a little bit, over the edge. And so he's just doing all this stuff with his eyes and things. And I don't know, it was interesting. For a moment, I was wondering if maybe I mean, he must have been too young, but because Back to the Future was just like a year before this came out. So I don't think they would have been considering someone like him for this role. But he definitely seemed to have some Michael J. Fox energy as he got more crazy, which I thought was kind of cool. And I don't know, and also this is also one of those movies where you watch it and like you're just reminded of what life was like in the '80s. Down to like the computers and you know furnishing and everything. I don't know why certain movies it really pops out, some it doesn't. This one it really stood out. Maybe because the it's set in a haunted house, and so furnishings and all that kind of stuff is pretty important. Um, yeah, so I mean that's pretty much it. It's free on Prime right now, so if you haven't seen it, it's worth checking out. Again, the special effects are interesting. I really like the way the Richard Mall character looks when he becomes a ghost. Like in the flashback sequences, he just looks like a normal guy doing in Vietnam. But after he dies and after he comes back, he's just this giant sort of rotting soldier. He still has like the camouflage and the helmet on, and again he looks like Eddie. And I just think I've always remembered that monster, and so I kind of think of this as a monster movie. It's just got that monster movie vibe because especially the characterization of the Big Ben ghost is just so important. Um, and again, I mean, I think the easiest description is a kind of corny haunted house movie. It does get into serious stuff, but it doesn't feel like it. Like, sometimes when movies do the thing where they get into something serious, but they throw in humor, the humor actually intensifies the seriousness of it. In this case, I don't feel like it does. I do feel like the humor accentuates a lot of the horror, but I don't think that the humor adds to the Vietnam backstory and all that. I feel like it does subtract from it in the sense that again, it just kind of makes it a lighter thing. It's not. It doesn't feel as weighty. Even like because this character, the Roger Cobb character, he's supposed to be this guy that's clearly affected by his experience in Vietnam. And so there are these scenes where he'll be writing, because he's trying to write a book about his experience there. He's a horror writer, but he wants to write about his experience in Vietnam. And he you know, there's supposed to be these emotional scenes where he's writing it as a flashback, and then he comes to and there's an expression. It just it doesn't land for me in those scenes. It landed, I don't know, it just felt, it's not that he was doing anything bad or anything like that. It just didn't feel like a real trauma or whatever. It just didn't have that weight to it in the scenes. I don't know. Again, I don't think they were going for that. And again, he's a horror writer. His agent is telling him that, nobody wants to hear about his experiences in Vietnam. They don't want to listen. They're not interested in reading about Vietnam. They want to read about horror books. And so I think one of the ideas of it is, which makes sense again from the time that, people didn't really want to deal with the memory directly of it. They wanted to sort of deal with it indirectly through, like escapist horror, that type of stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, I certainly couldn't analyze the movie this late. As I just finished watching it. I was, my brain is not fully operational at this hour. So, in terms of meaning and stuff, I don't know. But just some thoughts that I had as I was watching it. Yeah, and again, it's on Amazon Prime. I'm pretty sure it was on Prime. I think that's where I saw it. Let me just double check that. I don't want to mislead people. Yeah, and I think it's free unless I have some. I don't think I have any subscriptions on Prime, but unless it's like part of a subscription service that I don't know I have, it should be free. It's 1986. It's an hour and 30 minutes. I'd say it's definitely worth checking out. I kind of like movies with William Kattner. He's not in too many. But when I was a little kid, I was a big fan of The Greatest American Hero. I actually went as The Greatest American Hero for Halloween one year. I had black curly hair, but I insisted that my mom help me find a curly haired wig, and she ended up making me like a yarn curly haired wig or something. I don't remember how we did it, but it was a ridiculous outfit. But I just always thought it was funny that I already had the curly hair, and I just, instead of just keeping it, I had to wear like a wig with yarn that didn't look real. So I like movies with him. This one, this is the movie I think of when I think of him as in films. This and Carrie probably. Yeah, I don't know. I do recommend watching it, and I don't know. I think just in case I just want to make sure there's nothing else I want to bring up or talk about before I end it here. I guess for those who are interested, and if you're listening strictly for the house overview, maybe you're not. Lady 87 is coming out soon. It's kind of like a stealth promotion that I'm putting on the back. I should be putting these things at the front of all my things. I always forget. I'm not good at marketing. I don't like marketing. I'm just not good at it. Just plain and simple, I'm not good at it. So, but yeah, the Lady 87 book, which is the Wandering Heroes of Overgate Adventure, that's kind of like a crime sandbox thing. That is in layout. That is like legitimately in layout. Like the cover's being put on and everything right now. So, and I just approved like the last changes. So, we're shooting for November. Hopefully things will be good by November. I just had to get the proof and make sure everything's good. But that should be out soon. I had mentioned on a blog entry that the price was going to be like $59 because of premium paper. It turns out I can't get that premium paper, so it's going to be like $49, which is still higher than I would have liked. This is a book I in the past it probably would have been $39, but because of fuel costs and which increased like the shipping costs, and I think even there were some other costs that were the seller was explaining to me, but basically the prices have to go up a bit. So it's going to be $49.99, which if I could make it cheaper, I would. But at least it's not $59.99. On the one hand, I wanted that premium paper, but on the other hand, I was a little bit irritated that I was raising the price that high. So, in the end, it's going to look like the other Wandering Heroes of Overgate books. I kind of wanted this one to look a little bit special because it might be the last Wandering Heroes of Orgrimmar book, but I don't know for sure. Um, and again, this was one that really went through development. Like it was. I started it, I think, in 2016, 2017. I don't remember exactly when, but yeah. So it's 18. I think 20. Yeah, so it's like 5 years. Um, yeah, and yeah, so that should be out soon. I'll let people know when it is. I'm also doing this thing, which I'm going to blog about soon. I've been running the Book of Crypts for Ravenloft, and I'm going to blog about that. I've kind of written about it in forums and stuff, but I want to consolidate all that onto blog entries. I'm running each adventure from Book of Crypts with the 2E system, second edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm just going straight through, and I'm kind of having the party level up in order to meet the minimum requirements for each adventure. But I'm also, the way 2E worked was different classes level at different XP rates, so I've been basing when people level on, eyeballing, of course, but basing it on that, those numbers. So something like a thief would advance faster than a mage. That was the important part of the balance for the old system. So I'm trying to do all that because I want the players who weren't around for this part of gaming history, or they at least weren't gamers at that time. I want them to sort of see what it was like, and I'm just running the adventures as written. It's been interesting. I always like going back to Ravenloft and running it, and just, I don't know, it was my favorite line growing up, and I ran it so much, but it's been a while since I've run regular campaigns. I ran one a few years ago. I think I ran Feast of Goblins again not too long ago, but I ran that for one of my other systems. I ran it for Sartorius, and I ran a campaign, I think, shortly after my surgery. I know, yeah, because I was reading, I was reading all the Ravenloft material again as I was recovering, and I ran players through. I know I ran them through the Created. I think I might have run them through The Walking Dead. I can't remember the Night of the Walking Dead. I can't remember if I did or not. And there may have been like new adventures too that I just kind of made up. And I forget. There was also Adventure in Tempest that I ran. That was a module. But yeah, so this is the Book of Crypts. My next goal is when I get back to Ravenloft, and I don't know when it'll be after I do the Book of Crypts one. But my next goal is to do Castles Forlorn, because that's when I really remember making a big impression. And I'd love to run it again. I'd love to see if it still has the weight. Lisa Smedman wrote it, and I don't know. I used to like her adventures a lot, and she did a lot of them for that line. So, I think that that one in particular, though, that had some really cool things in it that were just in terms of like everything. Like the content was good, but also the ideas of the overall structure were good. It was just it was a cool box set, and it was a domain that was kind of hard to imagine prior to that box set being released. There was a little bit on it in the original box set, but it was, I don't know, I always found it kind of tricky. It had flavor, but it was not fully fleshed out, and a lot of the domains don't need to be fleshed out, but that was one that, like a lot of the domains, they were bare bones, but I just kind of got it, or I ran with it. And Forlorn was always difficult for me until that point. I think she did a really good job of bringing that domain to life. So anyways, I'm gonna get going. Again, the movie is House. Recommend it. 1986. I don't know if I mentioned the director or not. The director, let me see if I can find this. The director was it Steve Miner, and a screenplay by Ethan Wiley. So, yeah, so I'll let you go, and until next time, I will talk to you later.